Welcome back. Today, Russian missiles hit residential buildings before dawn in Zaporizhzhia, killing at least 2 people. The regional governor says amid humiliating battlefield losses, the Kremlin will resort increasingly to scorched earth attacks, with civilians paying the price. Well, joining me now is global affairs analyst Michael Bossacu. So where are we, do you think, with this awful war? The Ukrainians seem to be taking more ground with some speed, but the Russians, as we see today, keep hitting civilian residential targets.
Sure. Well, good to be with you in person. Look, it's a split-screen reality compared to what Mr. Putin is saying. I mean, huge battlefield losses. They're, as you know, mobilizing 300,000 men, basically, in my opinion, going on a death mission. I'm sorry to say this, but I think many will be returning in boxes back to Russia. And this mobilization basically affects every area code in Russia. And when you get so many angry moms who have to receive their dead sons, that's going to be a big problem for Mr. Putin. But on the Ukrainian side, high morale. They're benefiting a lot from Western intelligence and just really good planning. So it's amazing the gains the Ukrainians are getting. And of course, the West cannot stop right now supporting them. They have to continue so they can push the Russian army back to where they came from.
And these 4 regions that Vladimir Putin rather farcically announced was now Russia. Do you see Ukrainians retaking those areas?
I do. They're making very, very good progress. And, you know, I think the Ukrainians realize of course, most of the people in those areas are pro-Ukrainian. And it's hard to believe that in those areas absorbed, you could face the situation that pro-Ukrainians could get conscripted and forced by the Russians to the battlefront. But no, I think this is very, very important politically and symbolically for Ukraine to retake those regions. And I would even see a day where perhaps Ukraine tries to regain Crimea. That's what most Ukrainians I talk to.
Well, I was going to ask you about that. I mean, that is some way down the road. With winter coming, how crucial do you think the next few weeks will be?
Extremely crucial. I think we're only just 2 or 3 weeks, perhaps 4 from the very cold weather. This will change the terrain, obviously, and make it much more difficult. But I think, again, the Ukrainians are very well prepared. I think, Mark, what you're going to see as well is the Russians, with these huge losses, turning more to technology. For example, those deadly Iranian-built kamikaze drones that struck Odessa the other day. And sadly, again, to scorched earth policies, long-range the missiles, as well as perhaps even chemical, biological, tactical, nuclear.
Do you think that's a serious possibility? I mean, Putin can't see, surely, any good option in that kind of strategy, surely.
Someone like Mr. Putin, who is backed into a corner, doesn't react very well. He strikes back. The West has to realize that. I think what is really important for now for the UK and the US is to use telephone diplomacy with people who have leverage, like the Chinese, for instance, like the Indians, and make sure Mr. Putin understands that this is a red line. This line cannot be crossed. Otherwise, we go into very dangerous territory. And quickly, I also don't rule out him doing something cynical and dangerous, sending a missile to that Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant and causing contamination.
So, do you think that Putin realizes, has he been told, do you think, that he is staring at least at the prospect of defeat?
He's living in a fantasy land. I mean, even this 300,000 mobilization doesn't make much sense, because this is basically now a high-tech war. By just throwing more men at the problem as cannon fodder won't change anything. But once again, I can't emphasize how important it is for Ukrainians to be supported. And I know, you know, being here in the United Kingdom with you, there's a lot of concern here about the coming winter. You've been broadcasting about that all evening. Perhaps Canadians, Americans, British and others have to prepare for what might basically become temporarily a war economy, because if we don't push Mr. Putin back now, he will come back, and his war effort could go beyond Ukraine's borders into NATO territory.
Yeah, well, that's interesting. I was speaking to a senior British diplomat the other day about this, and he was saying that they felt that Putin's strategy could be to outlast the commitment of the West, if you like.
Yes, well, that's what we saw happen in 2014, 2015. I was there as part of the OSCE Special Monitoring Mission. And, there were many opportunities for Russia to sign peace accords, the Minsk agreements, and adhere to them and pull back. But with every possible opportunity, they violated those agreements. We've seen agreements even during this phase of the war, signing humanitarian corridor agreements, supposedly allowing civilians out. And what do? They strike back. So he's not to be trusted. That's why we can't bluff our way through this. We have to be very clear on what the West's intentions are, and that is to push him back completely and arm the Ukrainians, if need be, to the teeth.
Right. And I think there's only 30 seconds or so left. How long do you see it going on? Do you see this war lasting for many more months?
Well, if there's any grain of sensibility with Mr. Putin, he will see in what a bad position him and his forces are in. Ukrainians are making amazing gains, and they'll find some perhaps way to retreat in which they could explain it to their own citizens. Just very quickly, I was speaking to one of my experts in New York, and he said, yeah, it could be that Putin deliberately contaminates an area, nuclear perhaps, or biological, and that would be their kind of excuse to retreat.
Right. Okay, well, look, listen, thank you very much for coming in. Appreciate your time. Thank you. Just time for a quick look at the weather.